Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Just yesterday, we had a special guest for us, and today we have another special guest. She's an amazing author, and she has written many amazing books. My favorite book by her is called The Night Diary, and she has recently put out a sequel to it called A Meal and the After. If you already don't know who this is Veera Hiranandani. Hi Veera, how are you today?
Good. I'm really glad to be here and I'm excited to talk with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on. So please introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your latest book.
Sure. So as you gave me in that nice introduction, I'm Veera Hiranandani and I write mostly middle grade, although I have a chapter book series called Phoebe G. Green, and I have actually my first picture book that just came out that I didn't even mention yet. Called The Greatest, but most people might probably my most known book is The Night Diary, which I wrote. It's a about a 12-year-old girl who has to leave her home during the partition of India, and she writes a diary about it, telling her mother, who's no longer living, kind of the circumstances of how they have to leave. And the reason that I wanted to write a book about that topic of the partition of India in 1947 was because my father and his family also had to leave their home during the partition and cross over the new Indian border. And, it was something that I grew up hearing about. And I wanted more young people and people of all ages to be able to either connect to that history if it's part of their family history as well, or learn about this huge piece of our global history. So that was what really motivated me.
Yeah, I mean that's honestly like such a beautiful story, honestly. Like these kind of topics are really hard to write about, even if you do connect with them and do have like your own personal experiences attached to it. Because sometimes what happens is no matter how close you are to the topic that you're writing about, sometimes there's always like this one person who gets offended by it or feels like you're making things seem more fictitious than they actually were, that kind of thing.
Sure. I definitely felt very intimidated taking on a piece of history that's a very, it's very emotional for people who have connections or went through it themselves, and possibly lost people during this time or suffered in that way. And so, it wasn't always easy to kind of know what lens to put on it, the story I wanted to kind of shape and offer to the reader, because there are so many partition stories out there living in the people that went through this time, but there aren't that many stories, especially for young people, written about this time. And it was a very violent time. It was a very difficult time for so many. So I had to really figure out how I was going to balance all of that and make a story that was appropriate for a young person, but also not hide the truth from young people, because I feel like they know when people aren't telling them the truth. Um, but, we can talk more about the idea of truth and fiction and how you sort of balance that and what is truth and fiction, right?
Absolutely. I think it's just like really important to kind of that's the thing, right? Many people, many authors, many writers do not from the start, but like sometimes they do believe that okay, I'm writing for a younger audience, I need to make sure it's easy to understand, easy to read. But then sometimes there are a few authors and writers who are like, kind of diminishing the value of their work because they're trying to dumb it down for readers when they
Right.
really don't realize how established we are as readers because we have a
Hmm.
vast imagination. If you're reading, you have an imagination, whether you like to admit it or not, right? And so I was wondering, like, how do you kind of stop yourself from doing this if you are the kind of person who kind of writes about these kind of topics?
Hmm. Well, I always think about who am I writing through? What's my point of view? And so I'm thinking about this 12-year-old girl. When I'm writing the story, and Nisha is the main character of the Night Diary. She has a twin brother named Emil, And so my follow-up, my companion book to The Night Diary is focused on Emil's point of view after the family leaves and they end up in Mumbai, then called Bombay, which is the same direction that my father's family went, and they went to Jodhpur and then they ended up going to Bombay. So I was sort of following that. But the Night Diary is in Nisha's point of view. So for me as a writer, I'm trying to, as deeply as I can, become Nisha, and how is she going to see the world? What are the questions she's asking? So I'm not thinking so much about my reader actually at that point. I'm really thinking about my characters and the way they see the world and kind of the truth of that. And I want to get as close to that as I can. So then when another 12-year-old, or however old the reader is, reads it, that character feels genuine and authentic, and it's not, I don't want them to notice the adult creating the 12-year-old character. I just want them to believe in that 12-year-old character. But it takes a lot of practice and a lot of, trial and error, and a lot of reading on my part, just reading as many books as I can to see how other people do that. So it's not an easy task, but it's definitely worth it for me.
It's honestly quite interesting how you mentioned that, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, readers can step into the shoes of the characters, kind of talk and understand through that. But like what you mentioned about being focused on your character as a person, almost like they are existing right next to you, is really important actually. I think I understand what you're saying about like, connecting with them almost as if they are alive, right?
Mhm.
That kind of gives that depth and like emotion to them.
Exactly. I was once on a panel and somebody asked, I can't, one of the, either the moderator, the interviewer, or maybe it was another author had asked, do you think, no, I'm sure it was the interviewer, do you think, and we were all adults, do you think that you need to be a parent to understand what to sort of write for kids and create younger characters? And my answer to that was absolutely not. I think that it's so much more important. I mean, I am a parent, and sure, that might help me in a certain way of like understanding something my particular kid has gone through. Maybe I'll have a certain viewpoint on that, but I think it's so much about remembering who you were as a person, as a young person, and really connecting to that 12-year-old self as deeply as you can. Even if you're writing fantasy or science fiction, you still want to try to remember, what it felt like to have a difficulty with a friend, or be scared, or be worried about your parents, or be worried about something going on at school, or whatever your life is throwing at you. And so that's where I go when I write.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's such a good answer, like in terms of like what the interviewer asked you, because you know, even for like young writers, right, we always have a few young writers out there. And
Hmm.
so with them, obviously, they're young children. I mean, I'm not assuming anything, but like they often, what they do is they have wild imagination. They read so much, write so much. And so for them, it's simply like, you are already the age of your characters. So I guess that also gives you that step up, I guess. But that kind of brings me to my last and final question for you, which is that what advice do you have for like these young writers who want to kind of become that author, or become like, this person who writes books not only for themselves but also for others, that connects with them and helps them move forward in life?
Yeah, I mean, many authors say this, and I'll say it too. It's certainly write as much as you can, and read as much as you can. But beyond that, I think your generation, is really given a lot. You have so many different messages that you can access all the time. And I think the internet is an incredible place. I think an amazing tool. Even social media can be an amazing tool if you use it for good, right? Or we can use these things that where maybe it's not in the best way, because they're all just tools. But you also have a lot of access to what everybody else is doing, what older authors are doing who are published, who's winning what contest, what's going on, and it can create those comparisons of who's doing what and what am I doing? And even, as an adult, we in the author community, we are on social media comparing ourselves all the time. And so I miss sometimes when I was a kid and I was just writing because I've always written and I could just play. I could just experiment. It wasn't about like, I have to get this right for this particular contest or this particular class. It was just mine and it was mine to experiment with. So, however, you can create that for yourself as a writer, I think it's really important to just create that sort of free play space where you're not judging yourself and you're just, practicing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, honestly. Um, like everything you said, like, about practicing, writing, it's all about like that exposure to what you're trying to do, not just for writing, in fact. I feel like even if you want to do acting, singing, dancing, whatever it's like always about like practicing doing it. You can't just, watch someone. You have to also kind of do it yourself as well to practice and like get that experience.
Yeah, and also to play, right? Whatever you're doing, whether it's a sport or an instrument or, dancing or writing or painting, how are you finding joy in that? How are you playful in that? Because that's what drew you to it in the first place.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming, Vera. I had a great time talking to you.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and write us a review. Also, do not forget to check out Vera's sequel to The Night Diary called A Meal and the After. Thank you so much again for listening, and I'll see you all next week.